Hi, I'm Amelia. Thank you for joining me today for a walkthrough of the many features and functions of InfoSaaS. We've developed our risk management solution so that organisations can quickly and easily take control of threats and vulnerabilities to their information assets. We've helped many businesses around the world to implement and improve effective information security management systems, to achieve and retain ISO 27001 certifications, and to ensure the resilience of their operations against an ever-increasing cyber threat landscape. The system that we're about to explore uses our demonstration environment, which is ideal for customers that are undertaking their own evaluation of InfoSaaS. It's also useful for training purposes to avoid accidentally changing live data. Be aware that this environment contains fictitious data, and as it may be being used by concurrent users, it'll reset to its default data every 30 minutes. As this is a demonstration system, you should not input any real names or data during your evaluation sessions. Let's start our journey with the General menu, which can be accessed on the left-hand side of the screen. In this section, we have a number of values and options that determine how InfoSaaS behaves in line with the requirements of the user organisation. For now, we can see two value sliders, which tell InfoSaaS how to react to different risk scenarios, as well as options which, for example, tell InfoSaaS how often risk assessments and documents need to be reviewed. You'll see that there are small blue information icons against each. Clicking on any one of these will take you to the appropriate section of the InfoSaaS manual and provide more focused information. Next in our General menu is Manage Roles. With InfoSaaS, we purposely kept the management of roles and users separate. The reason for doing this is to ensure continuity, so, for example, when someone leaves the business or changes their role, we won't have their assets and documents being abandoned with nobody looking after them. Instead, we assign assets and documents to a role, for example, an ISMS manager, network manager, or accounts assistant. I can easily add a new role by clicking the Create Role button at the top of the screen. Back to the General menu, and now we can look at Manage Users. This shows us a list of users within InfoSaaS, and I can add more users by clicking the Create User at the top of the screen. You'll note that each user has one or more roles assigned to them, as we noted a moment ago. To change one or more properties of a user, I simply click Edit next to their name. Aside from changing their email address and assigned roles, this area also allows us to determine what type of user each individual is, whether a system-wide ISMS manager, a role-specific asset owner, or a non-functional read-only account. What we can also determine from the User menu, looking to the right-hand side of the screen, is the date that the user last logged into InfoSaaS. This allows ISMS managers to see which users are active. Let's move on to list the security controls that we'll be using within our risk assessments shortly. By default, our software refers to ISO 27001, the 2013 version, which contains 114 controls, and you'll probably recognise some of these controls if you've had a look through the standard. At the bottom of this listing, one additional feature you may notice is that when we get down below 18, you'll find some extra controls that start with C. These are the supplementary controls from the separate standard ISO 27018 and are very useful if you're putting personal data into cloud computing environments. For now, we'll overlook these additional controls, but if personal data in cloud services is part of your organisation, or you have an interest in ISO 27018, please refer to the InfoSaaS manual or get in touch with us for more information. Back at the top, and you'll also notice that some of these controls are marked as baseline. A baseline control is one that's been identified as applying to every asset automatically. If I click the baseline title to sort them, all the currently selected baseline controls can be seen together. It's easy to see that these are reasonably generic information security activities that should be in place as part of an effective information security culture. Clicking on a control number allows me to select or deselect a control as baseline, and optionally allows me to add supporting evidence to confirm the existence of the baseline control. Next, down on our left-hand menu is Assets. It's important that we take a moment to understand that there are different types of assets within InfoSaaS. If I click Manage Assets, you'll see all our demonstration assets. In the top left, I can change how many appear on the screen if I wish to get more assets to display on the screen at any one time. I can also click the column headings to sort the data in different ways. Now, the important thing in this view is the category column, which describes the different types of assets that we have defined. The reason for various asset categories is because within InfoSaaS, we've identified that different categories of assets have different threats and vulnerabilities that could affect them that we need to risk assess. As an example, let's take a look at my password database. I can click on Edit. You can see that it's an information asset. At the bottom, I'm presented with 3 drop-down menus for assessing the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of this information asset. By selecting the appropriate values, this selection tells InfoSaaS how important this information asset is to my organization. These values indicate, for example, whether an information security breach would have little impact on the business or whether it would have a significant impact. This will help me to ensure that the right type of risk assessment is undertaken. On the same screen, but over on the right, I can also determine and map the dependencies of assets. Within InfoSaaS, we like to see how the various assets link together by identifying their parent and child relationships. So for our passwords database, I can see that it has 2 assets which it relies upon, these being 2 pieces of software. From here, I can map many different parent and child relationships from the simple pull-down menu. I can check current dependencies by clicking View Asset Dependencies in the left-hand menu, and I'm presented with a visual representation of how our assets relate to each other within the business. You can see in this example that I have personnel records, which link to personnel software, which in turn links to a Linux operating system on a business server in a data center. So this helps us when managing our ISMS, because if there were ever to be a security incident or if there was an expired risk assessment, we can instantly inform everyone in the dependency chain that their information may be at an increased level of risk. If I come back to my passwords database, I can now have a look at the risk assessments that are in place. Using these buttons, I can either review the last assessment completed, edit a risk assessment in progress, or I can issue a new assessment. This is what we're going to do now. The determination of whether or not an individual risk is acceptable is based on a calculation against values set in our system parameters, which we reviewed a few moments ago. So here I note we have a risk appetite which is set at 10. Don't forget that everywhere in InfoSaaS that you see a little blue eye icon, it's a link to the relevant section of the user manual. So if I click here, it will go to the manual, and it shows us how we determine the numeric values for probability and impact. From there, we determine that 10 is an acceptable value. Anything below 10 should be acceptable for our business. The risk is manageable, and we may not have a requirement to further reduce this risk level. However, any value of 10 or above will be a challenge to our business, and we need to do something to make that risk more acceptable. So let's return to the risk assessment for the password database, and I can see that there are a wide variety of threats and vulnerabilities specifically related to information assets which are being presented to me. As we look down this list, we can see that there are lots of different issues that can affect an information asset, from being lost or stolen, having unauthorized changes made, or being disposed of incorrectly. I may decide that not all of these threats are applicable to our specific asset. So, as an example, if this asset isn't based in the cloud, I will probably decide that theft or misuse in the cloud is not relevant, and I can turn that threat off by unticking this box. I can now see that the threat has gone away and it no longer exists within the risk assessment. Conversely, if I wish to add any number of new threats, these are completely customizable within InfoSaaS. Now let's have a look at an assessment of one specific threat. Here I'm looking at our passwords database, and the first thing that I want to look at is the threat of loss or theft by employees or contractors. What I'm about to assess are the consequences of someone stealing our password database. If I click on this threat, the first thing that InfoSaaS asks me to do is to identify the probability of that threat actually happening, and then impact it would have to the business if it were to do so. Now, within InfoSaaS, we have a set of parameters that allows us to define which of these are acceptable to the business and which are not. In this example, I might say that it's possible that it might be stolen, but the impact to the business is only medium. We will survive and we'll get by. The threat now comes up as acceptable and a green tick appears. However, if I decide that the probability is likely and that the impact on my business is critical, then we note by the additional text box which now appears that something isn't quite right, and that this risk will be higher than we can accept. So I should now add some narrative here to justify my assessment. Now we can see that a red cross has appeared, which indicates that the risk is not acceptable, and I will need to progress it through one of the risk treatment options within our software. InfoSaaS has made a comparison against my acceptable risk level of 10, which was previously set in the system parameters. Now I can proceed through the rest of the threats individually, in each case determining the probability and impact of each. Next to each threat, we can see a blue arrow on the end of the line. If we click that, it takes us to the threat-specific section where we can start to match the controls from ISO 27001 that are identified as helping to manage that threat for the specific asset being assessed. Here you can see that there's a selection of controls available. For the threat loss or theft by employees or contractors, as an example, I might have reasons to stop people from getting at it in the first place, such as user registration and deregistration activities. Or I may have user rights reviews so that users do not have too much access when they don't need it. Within each of these controls, we can see a box that pulls down asking us to identify supporting evidence. From our many years' experience with ISO 27001 work, we understand that auditors always like to see why you've chosen a control. So within InfoSaaS, we have a facility that allows the user to add evidence to support user registration and deregistration activities. In this example, therefore, we might select our internal policy that defines how we register users, and we can also click the green plus button to add more fields for any extra pieces of evidence that we feel are relevant. Why do we need this level of detail? When we're completing risk assessments, it helps users to understand what evidence and activities are available to support their decisions. At audit time, it helps them as they will have a reference in front of them to help an auditor understand the reasons why they've selected certain controls. You don't have to select all of the controls offered, and optionally, you don't have to choose evidence. Many of our customers do find that adding evidence to a control really helps them when it comes to audit time, as it gives them the confidence that they have the right things in place. Now, this list that I'm currently scrolling through here is a sample list of about 150 pieces of commonly used business evidence, which are provided as standard within InfoSaaS deployment. This list is fully customizable. I can go to the Documentation menu, click Manage Evidence, and see where this evidence list is populated from. Here I can easily add and remove evidence that's relevant to your company. By now, you've probably realized that many items within InfoSaaS are fully customizable. We support customers across a wide variety of countries and business sectors, and no two InfoSaaS deployments are used in the same way. Every customer needs to review and enhance the standard information presented within InfoSaaS to make the software more closely aligned to their specific sector and business activities. This high-level overview shows us how risk assessments work is managed within InfoSaaS. In the example before us, we can see that in this tab we have 22 that are outstanding and need to be completed. We can also choose to see that we have 7 that have already been finished, who has completed them and when. And in this example, we've also got one that's awaiting management review. The one that's awaiting review indicates that it contains at least one risk inside the assessment that's unacceptable to our business. As we can see, it's the benefits framework, and if I click on Review, I can have a look inside to find out what's wrong with it. This shows me that we have 2 issues, one of which relates to legal jurisdiction. You can see that there's a risk with the data potentially being in a country with a different data protection regulation. This risk clearly needs to be fixed. So, as an ISMS manager, at the bottom of the screen, I am presented with a number of options. I may choose to accept the identified risk and proceed to try and treat it by clicking the Finalise button, or alternatively, I may choose to disagree with the asset owner and I can send it back to them to take a second look. In summary, I've got options here for whether I accept the risk on behalf of my organisation or whether I return the risk because I don't think it's valid on this occasion. If I decide to finalise and accept the risk, a warning appears advising me that this risk assessment contains unacceptable risks. Once finalised, it will be frozen and the unaccepted risks will be highlighted within the risk treatment plan. The actions within the risk treatment plan will then need to be progressed as appropriate. If I decide to finalise this example, looking into the risk treatment plan, we can see that the legal jurisdiction issue we identified within my benefits framework has been extracted. InfoSaaS has taken the individual threat that was unacceptable and loaded it into the plan. Within the risk treatment plan, open issues are shown in red and closed issues identified by their green colour. At the moment, this risk has not been accepted, it hasn't been accepted by management and it needs attention, which is why it's presented with an Edit button. If I click this Edit button, it'll give me an option as an ISMS manager to accept it, and I can record some supporting text to provide some background that can be used to explain my thinking. I can decide here when I want this to be reviewed again. It probably shouldn't wait a whole year for its next scheduled review. InfoSaaS will then present the risk assessment for reassessment at the appropriate time. So, in my risk treatment plan, I can see which risks have and haven't been accepted, and it gives us visibility in front of an auditor to demonstrate what risks have been identified by our risk management activities and details of what we've done about them. InfoSaaS also provides a handy risk register, which displays a sorted summary of all vulnerability and threat analysis results for easy digestion by senior management. Back to our general menu, and under System Parameters, you can see the Risk Appetite slider, which we can move up and down and determine whether risks are acceptable or not. It's very important that these sliders are set correctly. The other system parameters displayed here define by default how frequently we want to revisit our risk assessments. Most organisations will prepare their risk assessments once a year. Some may wish to do them less frequently, others may wish to do them more frequently. It all depends on your risk appetite. Within these parameters, you can also decide whether you want to select evidence to support selected controls, and this can be set as optional or mandatory. One of the documented requirements of ISO 27001 is to produce a statement of applicability. This summarizes the manner in which individual controls have been selected during asset risk assessment to manage risks, and is automatically updated every time a risk assessment is completed. I can load the statement of applicability by selecting View Current on the left-hand menu. We can see that all of our demonstration system assets are listed along the top with hyperlinks back to their individual asset records, and down the left-hand side we can see all of the security controls from ISO 27001. An empty circle indicates that the controls is not a baseline control, nor has it been selected by any risk assessment. A dot within a circle is a baseline control, and therefore has been selected as being relevant to all assets. If it's a black solid circle, it indicates that the controls have been selected by one or more risk assessments. When your external auditor looks at this statement of applicability, they can easily understand why a control has been selected. For audit purposes, many auditors like to have a time-stamped piece of evidence that they can refer to, so also have an option to download the statement of applicability as a time-stamped CSV spreadsheet. You can take a specific snapshot for your own records at any time. InfoSaaS has an automatic calendar function to inform users when ISMS-related activities are coming up, or highlight when specific activities are overdue. For example, in our demonstration system, you can see some security incidents which are shown as red dots. By moving forward, you can see risk assessments coming up in the future and also any documentation that's due for review. You can also create and enter your own events, such as reminders for specific types of training or upcoming information security audits. Whilst some organisations may have some form of formal document management system, we realise that some smaller enterprises may not. So our InfoSaaS software helpfully provides a lightweight document management solution. This allows you to manage and control documents within InfoSaaS itself. For example, let's review our sample disciplinary policy. You can see when it's due for its next review and look at the contents of the current version. You're also able to see if someone's working on a draft version. It also allows an option to add hyperlinks to documents which may be hosted elsewhere, making it easier to reference and access content. You can also retire documents when they are no longer needed by your organisation. One of the key requirements for effective information security is working out whether you have issues with confidentiality, integrity and availability of data, or whether one of your supporting assets is not performing as it should. For example, someone forgets to lock the door on the data centre, an ID badge is stolen, or there's a virus attack on software on a laptop. When this happens, we should immediately raise a new security incident within InfoSaaS. Select the Security Incidents menu, and then choose Manage Incidents. On this screen, we can see different types of activities. At the top, there are activities which are new incidents that have not yet been assigned to someone, so they need to be reviewed and passed to an appropriate owner to progress. There may also be some open security incidents. All of these are currently being progressed within the business. This example has been open for 5 days and is currently assigned to Jack Jackson. We can also see resolved issues. For example, when Jack has finished, he can then request a formal resolution acceptance by the ISMS manager. Once complete, it'll then move into resolved incidents. To do this for yourself, look at the incidents that need to be assessed, such as antivirus software. In this example, a colleague has come into InfoSaaS and raised an incident stating that the antivirus software has failed to find a virus and the server has been isolated, but there is still an outstanding action. We can leave a comment and then move the incident to open and update it. We now find that the antivirus incident has come out of the To Be Assigned list and it's moved into Open, where it awaits our further action. The next step would be to let my team investigate, and every time they do so, they can place a comment against the incident and add narrative to help build the investigation and resolution story. Then, when the incident is finally closed, we can refer back and explain to the auditor what we did. Once the incident's finished with, it can be closed pending approval. It'll then move up to the Resolved section and will require formal review by an ISMS manager before finally being closed. The approver can then either open it again if it's felt that more needs to be done, or agree it and mark it as complete. When completed, it'll move into the Resolved Incidents section. Also on the left-hand menu is a separate section for corrective actions, which can be used to record actions coming out of risk assessments, customer complaints, internal or external audits, or site assessments, for example. This is a generic workflow where you can raise an action and determine how it moves through the business. Users can collaborate together, noting their progressive actions and outcomes so that the corrective action moves towards completion and final sign-off. Much of the information we've explored today is automatically reported within the InfoSaaS management dashboard. This dashboard can be looked at in two different ways. Firstly, you can select to look at the dashboard as an ISMS manager and have visibility of all ISMS activities in motion and their status across the organisation. This is available by selecting the All option at the top right-hand corner of the dashboard. Our specific test user, Emma Leonard, can change her view by clicking Show My Status at the top right-hand corner, and she'll instead see the relevant statistics for herself, the assets and documents which Emma has responsibility for. Again, our helpful InfoSaaS user manual provides comprehensive guidance on the information displayed within the management dashboard. Within the InfoSaaS system, a number of automated email messages are produced to inform users of activities and issues which need their attention. However, please note that this functionality does not exist within the fictitious demonstration system we've been using in this session. In live customer environments, selecting My Email Alerts from the top right-hand menu, accessed by clicking on the username, allows each user to configure which automated email messages they wish to receive. Throughout our demonstration today, I've made numerous references to our helpful InfoSaaS user manual. This can also be accessed by clicking on Help from the top right-hand menu, again accessed by clicking on the username. I strongly recommend that you have a look through this, as it offers in-depth guidance on how to use our InfoSaaS software and the various options which are available to you. You'll see that the manual has been carefully written for users that are not information security experts, and it'll help them to get to grips with how to use our software quickly and easily. I hope that our session today has given you a useful insight into how our InfoSaaS IT risk management software works. It's already being widely used here in the UK, and with a growing number of customers around the world. We're pleased to have received feedback that they find it very easy to use, and that users that don't have previous information security experience can get to grips with our software quickly and easily. InfoSaaS is cloud-based, which means that it can be accessed throughout your organisation and your users can work on their own devices, whether that's laptops, desktops or tablets. Users can also access InfoSaaS from home or indeed anywhere with internet connectivity. The InfoSaaS software brings all the information back together into one central space. So as an ISMS manager, you'll have detailed data at your fingertips. If you've not yet had an opportunity to take a test drive of the InfoSaaS demonstration system for yourself, you can quickly gain access by completing the simple form which can be found on our website at www.infosas.uk. We'd be delighted to assist you in your evaluation, so please let us know of any questions you may have and we'll be pleased to help you. Thank you for your interest in InfoSaaS. We look forward to hearing from you soon.